Welcome to the 10 principles of good design when making a TCG. So the 10 principles of good design were created by Dieter Rams. Dieter Rams is a highly renowned German engineer who came up with these 10 principles of design, which we can use in pretty much any aspect of our lives. But today we are going to be using them in the form of creating a card game. So what drew me to Dieter Rams was one of Mark Rosewater's articles. For people who don't know, Mark Rosewater is the lead designer of Magic the Gathering, a certain TCG that you may or may not have heard of. So throughout this video, I will be taking quotes from Mark Rosewater's article here, which I'll also be linking in the description below if you want to read the full thing. But Mark does a really good job of tying in these 10 principles with TCG design. So if you are a TCG designer or just a game designer in general, maybe this video is for you. So first off, we have good design is innovative. And a quote from Mark Rosewater, he said, "Every new set should do something that hasn't been done before. This doesn't necessarily have to be as big as new keyword mechanic, but more often than not it will be." So with Mark Rosewater's personal experience, he normally likes to add like a new keyword that has a new feature. He sprinkles it in with a few of the new cards in the set, and then that creates the theme of that set, you know, creates that long lasting memory, which will actually tie into another one of the good design concepts. So maybe I'm getting a bit too far ahead of myself here. Another quote that he said for good design is innovative is, "Every new set should find ways to add new elements to old ideas." Another way to think of this is that every new set should give you new cards to add to your old decks, which is what I absolutely love about TCG design. You know, it's not just a case of every new season you're getting brand new cards and then you can only play with those cards. No, it's new pieces of the puzzle. You have to add them to your old cards, you know. It's an ever expanding game. So to be innovative, you don't want to just release the same old cards. You want to release something that is brand new, like a new keyword, perhaps a new strategy that starts to form, a new archetype that has its own system for play, you know. Perhaps you've only got one way of bringing out new cards onto the field by spending a resource, but what if we tap into another resource? So say you brought out a vampire class in your TCG or something, you start tapping in life and then now you can get out vampires. You're saving your other resource that you would normally use to summon creatures to the field. So now you've got another balance of play, and it does take a bit of play testing, but it's fun to experiment with these things and your players will appreciate that sort of innovation. Okay, and next up, good design makes a product useful. Now, how do we tie that into creating a TCG? To apply this to a game design, you simply have to define what the function of a game is. While there are numerous answers, I'll stick with my favorite. A game's function is to be fun. Yes, it should stimulate the mind, it should enable socialization, it should test players, it should do all sorts of things. But in the end, if players aren't enjoying themselves, nothing else matters. And that is the number one point, because think back from your own personal experience. When have you ever continued to play a game when it wasn't fun? When it's that uphill battle, it's that real struggle to try and get into it. Eventually, you put that game down and you don't come back to it. You always come back to the games that are fun. And another quote from Mark Rosewater from his 20 rules in 20 years of making Magic: "It is not your player's job to find the fun. You have to make sure the fun is presented to them." So what I would recommend that you do right now is make a checklist. And when you are creating a new card, a new mechanic, or any new system within your game, go through this checklist, and number one on that checklist has to be, is this fun? And no matter how much you love that new mechanic or new card, if it's not fun, then it doesn't tick the checklist and it needs to get scrapped. It needs to go because it is a distraction. Okay, and number 3 is good design is aesthetic. Game design is no different. Games have to feel right. For Magic, this means that we have to be conscious of many factors that might not seem important on the surface. This includes things like being careful how much we use a particular mechanic and where we put it in colour and rarity. It also includes what abilities we put together. Designers have to be very conscious about the overall feel of a card as they add or subtract to elements. And Mark actually gives a good example of this. So the aesthetics of numbers is what he dives into. If a card were to be played and it would instantly inflict 3 damage, then we would make sure that the card itself actually has 3 attack damage. That is because aesthetically they want that card to feel as if it is attacking as soon as it's coming out onto the field. If it was any other number, it would feel like some alternate effect, some power, some magical ability, or just something random that doesn't quite fit with the feel of the card. So I quite like that example because I hadn't thought about that in the past. When I've done on-play attack damage, I've just done lower level damage, I think, for the most part. So this is something that I'll be taking into consideration in future game design. Now is the time to ask them to like and subscribe. Okay, try using a joke to warm them up. Alright, knock knock. Who's there? Like who? Like and subscribe. Good design helps us to understand a product. The designer does not control in what order the player experiences the game. This means that great care has to be taken into communicate what is going on. The biggest way this is accomplished is by use of common cards. These cards are the backbone of the set because they will exist in the largest volume. If the designer wants to send a message about what the set is about, that message has to live in common to ensure that it will be seen. As often as I say, if your theme isn't in common, it isn't your theme. And yes, I completely agree with this. I actually did another video just like this. I'll put it above my head now. It'll be in the card thing. And it is about rarity and how common cards are essentially this. You know, common cards have to be simpler cards to introduce players to your game. And then we scale them up. It's one of my shorter Talk TCG videos, so it's worth a quick watch if you haven't seen it already and you want to know a little bit more about what has just been said right now. I'd recommend clicking that. Thank you. Good design is unobtrusive. The role of any individual card is to serve the needs of the set. The card's first duty is to the set, not to itself. One of the hardest things for designers to do is to pull the awesome card that isn't quite doing what it's supposed to be doing. The problem is that the card is less important than the set. If the card pulls focus, it disrupts the set. And I think many card designers are guilty of this. We end up looking through a magnifying glass at one card and we want to perfect that card and make it the best card in the world. You know, we can put this into it and put this into it and it can just do everything and it'll win the games and oh, it's amazing. But it needs to work with everything else. It needs to be a part of a team. It's like in football. If you've got one star player and the rest are just there to serve that star player, there's gonna be some animosity built up. I know with cards they don't have feelings and things like that, but it is going to throw off the balance of your card game that way. Everybody would see this one powerful card and then it becomes like a staple card that everybody has to have in their deck because it is the card to have. And then if everybody can put it in the deck and everybody has to have it in the deck and then it just becomes a staple meta card, then you've created yourself a bad game. You need to give room for other cards to show off and flourish. And with every new set that you add to your game, you have to make sure that you are innovating, which is another principle that we've already covered, but in a way that it is unobtrusive, that it doesn't actually disrupt the flow of your game. You can innovate and add new ideas to your game, but it has to complement the previous set. And that is a difficult one to do, so good luck with that. Good design is honest. So what could they mean by this? So games are about actions. They are about decisions. The way a game designer helps his audience find a fundamental truth is by forcing him or her to encounter a situation that parallels something from their life. Yeah, and that makes me think of TV shows more than anything else. You know, you have a hero with a dilemma, which I suppose you can put this into a game as well. So you have a hero with a dilemma. That dilemma is to like either save a person or save the day. You know, you're putting yourself in that situation. How would you decide what path to take, you know? Or are you the villain? Or are you the one that put the person in that danger and is trying to destroy the day? But are you trying to destroy the world, or are you trying to make the world better? There's also that side of the coin, you know. That is normally the concept of villains in stories and games and things. They have to be empathetic to a way. They have to have a reason why they are doing what they're doing. Otherwise, we don't fall in love with them. If they're just an evil villain, then they just lack depth. So be honest in your game design. Share your truths and beliefs, and you will find like-minded people that will feel the same way. If you want to have a villain that is tormented by something, make sure you feel something for that villain. Will people want to love or hate this character so much that they keep playing? And yes, I did mean to say hate, because hate is a very powerful emotion. We can decide what our principles are, and we could create a polar opposite, someone who is just against those principles. It's like saying I love peanuts, and then you've got a villain who is allergic to peanuts, so they want to wipe the world of peanuts so nobody can enjoy peanuts. And you're just going, but I love peanuts, so obviously I'm going to fight you against it because the world deserves peanuts. So I hope that example helped, and let's move on. Good design is durable. When I design a card, I think long term. I am making something that we could bring back the next time we revisit this theme. My goal isn't just to make cards that play well in the present. I'm shooting for making something classic. This drive is important because it raises the bar on your design. Disposable things use disposable ideas. Classic things use timeless ideas. Right, so take a look at your own TCG and ask yourself, is this TCG timeless, or is it a gimmick? You know, it's okay to have a gimmick. You can make a gimmick run for a few years. But ask yourself, what is your main goal? Do you want your TCG to stand the test of time? If you add this to your personal checklist when you're designing a card, is the card timeless? Then I think that is going to help you filter out a lot of rubbish cards. For a quick example, if your card is based off a meme, it is not going to age well. Yes, memes are funny. Memes can even last a few years, but eventually that joke will fade, and so will that card. It will fade into obscurity. Right, now good design is consequent to the last detail. Work hard to create those trophy eyes moments. It's why we spend hours upon hours working on the tiniest of tiny details. Every facet of Magic is going to be explored by someone. When they do, I want to have already been there. Little things matter because to people, little things matter. Now, translating over to card design, that will just be adding little nods to past cards. You know, this is something that players will appreciate. You know, you could have this awesome card, but in the background, you just do a little nod to a previous card. We've done this in our second set. I think we've got the Fang of the Draconax. Obviously, the Draconax was the big bad dragon in the first set, you know. And then we've got a Gobble, which is a new creature in the new set, and he's holding this giant Draconax Fang, you know, and it is massive. But there's the Gobble just jokingly holding it. Some of the fans even going, well, how did the Gobble get the Draconax? Is the Gobble a Draconax Slayer? Which is funny because the Gobble is just a very low level creature, but apparently he can take on a Draconax. But it made for some funny conversations, you know, it's a funny nod to a card, and you need a little bit of comedy in your cards. We have another card that we use as an example for this. It's called Fear Fuel. So in the background of Fear Fuel, we've got an Evocation Orb, which was a first set card. I'm not even sure if people really picked up on that. A lot of them were distracted by the other details of the card. Because another example is in the card itself, on on the desk at the front, there is some shard cards, but they're just like drawn on like just some basic paper. So it's like in that world they have shard cards, but they're more like on like a papyrus type paper. But you can see that the scratchings and everything is a similar design. So that was a funny little nod too. So we got a couple in just that one card there, just for the fans to look at and admire. You know, they see it, they enjoy the small details because it means so much more to them. All right, and next up we have good design is concerned with the environment. So when designing a card, the designer has to be conscious of where the card will be played. Cards don't live in a vacuum. They are a part of numerous ecosystems. A designer has to think about that as they design. Now, this is something that I actually teach at work as a moving and handling instructor, and that is ergonomics. Now, that is just one simple word to use instead of several here, where it's saying good design concerned with the environment. So the idea of ergonomics is a task needs to fit the person, not the person fit the task. And that essentially means, you know, like I've got my desk chair right here. You know, people aren't going to design a desk chair that is twice the size up here with arms up this high and just go deal with it. You'll have to sit in it like that. So I'm up here and now you can just see my legs dangling at the top of the screen there. Ergonomically, that doesn't fit me. You know, that task does not fit me. Instead, I've got a nice sensible desk chair. You know, I've got a cushioned back. I've got armrests down here. My feet touch the floor, so I've got balance. I can rock back and forth. That's another thing as well. I've got a rocking feature on the chair. That's also very nice. Ergonomically, it fits me. And this goes the same for cards with players and with other cards. The cards need to fit in with other cards. The cards need to fit in with players. Players ergonomically need to work well with cards. That's why we have cards that are that size, so they actually fit in our hands. So we're not going to go changing that to like the giant Pokemon cards, you know, like the ones we've got here, you know, we're not going to have a deck full of these because they're too big. They're not practical. And the same goes for cards working with other cards. You want to make sure that you're creating the right environment for your cards. You want to make sure that you're creating the right balance for your cards. So when you're creating a set, make something that works well together without disrupting previous sets if you have them, and with an eye on potential future sets and how they will intermingle with that. Probably another note to add to your checklist when you're designing a card, think of the big picture. Does this card fit into the big picture? All right, and thank you so much for getting this far. We are on to the last one, and that last one is good design is as little design as possible. So, you, the artist, are trying to connect with your audience. The more you clutter your message, the harder it is to deliver it. The same holds true for card design. If I want you to focus on a particular aspect of a card, every edition just dilutes my message. And this is really just a new way of telling an old story. You need to keep things simple. When we first made Shard TCG, I think we were a bit guilty of over designing. You know, we have 2 actions and those actions are able to attach action effects to them. So there's 2 numbers and then 2 actions attached to the effects. On top of that, you also have the creature's health and the creature's cost, and then an additional effect. There is a lot of things going on that card. Where if you look at a lot of modern day TCGs, they tend to have 1 or 2 numbers and 1 effect. Because when you're looking at one card, you can say, well, I can take in all of this information. That is fine. That's fair enough. But once you've got 3 or 4 of those cards on the field and your opponent has 3 or 4 of those cards on the field, suddenly there's a scaling issue here. There's a lot more that you have to keep track of. There is a lot of moving parts at work. This is why the individual card needs to be as simple as possible. But what if no? 1 task per card, keep it simple. If you want more tasks, then make more cards. You know, people don't have a problem getting more cards. People like cards. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I'm going to put some links on the side there just to plug myself. Just carry on watching my stuff forever and ever and ever. You don't need to sleep, you don't need to eat, you just need to consume more YouTube. So enjoy, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.